Right, year 11. Well done if you could identify the link between that intro music and what's going on at the moment. Apologies again if this presentation lacks a little bit of spontaneity. I've just spent about half an hour recording a version to find out I hadn't pressed record. So I'll endeavour to do it for you again and do it as well as I did it last time, fingers crossed. Just wanted to pick up on something. We're obviously meant this week to be doing C2 section B. So that is all of your speech writing, letter writing, report writing, review, article, that type of thing. But I just wanted to finish something off on the stuff that we were looking at last week, which was the section B for your component 1, which is your creative writing, your narrative writing. One of the exercises that we did last week was looking at the senses, and if you recall this particular diagram, we looked at various locations and we applied those senses to them. So what a place at a fun fair might look like, obviously it's the most one that we tend to refer to most. What about sound like, smell like, touch like, and even taste like, okay? What I wanted to show to you was actually, rather than just writing those as little details, even if you've actually tried that with other locations yourselves and things like that, how you can actually extend that and expand it into a piece of narrative / descriptive writing, okay? So, by way of example, okay, here we go. So imagine, and it's quite a common thing that might sort of come up, imagine that you are given a piece to write along the lines of write about a day out which evokes happy memories for you, okay? The temptation, as I said before, is simply to write something which is quite plot driven. The day which I was particularly happy, this happened, then this happened, and this happened, and I was happy because. If you do that type of thing, even if actually you punctuate it well, you use some good language, because it isn't very inventive, because it isn't very creative, you're not going to get the level that you deserve. If you do something where based on, and not the only technique I'm suggesting, but so were you to do something based on looking at the senses like we've done before, you could come up with something like this, and I'll go through it in a little bit of detail in a moment. So based on the one that we did on the English seaside, and all the details we might have on that, I simply integrated those sensory ideas into a piece of extended writing. So, I remember the crunch of shingle under my feet as my family and I trudged along the shore, picking up a shallow pebble, hooking it in my finger, and skimming it out to sea like a bouncing bomb. Okay? Now already you can see that I've done things like, in terms of my creativity, to be a little bit more inventive. So I've used ellipses here, I've used my ... Why? Because actually when we've got things like memory coming back to us, it's not going to be particularly organised. It's not going to be arranged in any particular way. So perhaps having something like that, within that punctuation, you've got a process going on, an emotional and a psychological and a mental process going on. When we've done previous bits of writing in the past, if you think about your planning and what I've suggested about that arrow-like plan, if you've got your temporal shift in there, so a point at which something happens to make somebody's memory go back in time, what is that thing that's going to happen? And it might be a very sensory thing, okay? So again, thinking how memory returns and you're using then punctuation in the right way. You're crafting your language using punctuation for meaning rather than simply putting in standard punctuation. Punctuation should be used to affect meaning. And if you think about it, all that analysis of literature that you've done over the years, particularly last year in year 10, all that analysis of literature has all been about not just identifying a particular technique, not even just quoting that technique, but very importantly and fundamentally to get those higher marks, how is it the use of that technique has impacted on you, the reader, in your analysis? What you're obviously trying to do in this particular case, you have now become the writer. So you've got to be thinking about how those techniques that you're employing are impacting on the reader, how they are affecting meaning. Okay? So, picking up a shallow pebble, hooking it in my finger and skimming it out to sea like a bouncing bomb. Again, there might be those little details, there might be important details, but those little details which we can all somehow refer to. We can all say, yeah, I recall doing that. When I've been on the beach, you do pick up a stone. You feel that smooth coldness of it in the palm of your hand. You might even throw it out to sea, hooking your finger around it like that. The small details are what matter. And in this case, I've used the simile as well. Then the sudden swish of a wave rushing in, sending us all shrieking and laughing up the beach. Dad didn't make it and was soaked. I recall him having to walk around squelchily for the rest of the day, even hanging his damp socks out of the window on the way home. The day was warm. The sun bathed my face from a wash of blue sky. I suppose that warmth symbolises my fond memories of my family together. It wasn't perfect, but even when things went wrong, we laughed. Lunch was sitting on a graffiti-scratched bench on the seafront, devouring vinegar-soaked chips with a wooden prong, or licking off the salt from our fingers. When one of the screeching seagulls, which had been circling constantly, swooped and picked a chip from my sister's fork, she sped away in terror. Her chips erupted like an exploding volcano all over the pavement. The rest of us laughed mightily, but shared our lunches with her anyway. And again, what we tried to do there is simply take those senses from that particular place and, if you like, integrate them, plant them in an extended piece of prose writing. Okay? You can see there that it doesn't have to be some big dramatic event. It doesn't have to end on some huge crescendo. In fact, what examiners do quite like is something of sensitivity, something of poignancy, something which is evocative of genuine memory. And even if you've got little things there, like we shared our lunches with her nonetheless, even though those are things that people can relate to and work well. Okay, so what I thought I'd do today is give you a few things that you can be doing to practice your creative writing. Obviously, as I said that very first thing this time last week, I'm just going to check if this is recording, by the way. Yes. One of the things that actually we did this time last week was I suggested why you might be doing this creative writing. When we look at things for your section B on component 2, they might be skills that you will need later in life anyway. Writing a letter, writing a report, okay? When it comes to creative writing, why would you be doing it? Well, at the moment it might be cathartic. At the moment it might be something which you simply enjoy doing. As you saw over the weekend, somebody in terms of writing a journal, it can be a written journal and you could simply spend a little bit of time each day writing that. Or it could be, using the technology which is available to you all, it can be a visual, auditory journal as well of what's going on. So don't just see this as something which is now redundant because you don't have to do an exam. It can be quite an enjoyable thing to do, but certainly something which is actually good for you in difficult times as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few exercises that you can be doing. You don't have to stick to a 450 to 600 words. You don't have to stick to 10 minutes planning, 35 minutes writing. You can do it for longer, you can do it for less time. Okay? If you've got a great period of time to be sitting at home, you could even write something, a number of short stories. Completely up to you. Okay? Another exercise here to do with senses that you could be doing. Okay? So referring to each of your senses, obviously reminding you of what they are, write a creative response in which you make use of as many of these details as you can, in any order you wish. It must be a coherent and cohesive narrative. Okay? You can't simply think, well, I've been given something to do, I'm simply going to plant these things in there when there's no particular reason for them to be there. They don't have to be integral, they can be red herrings, they can be things which actually distract but actually make the reader engage with something. But the key is to make sure that they serve some sort of purpose, even if it's just a literary purpose. Now, you have details here. For example, a coffee cup ring. Okay? Think about the senses that might apply to. The obvious one is the visual. It's up there. You see the coffee cup ring. But there might be other senses which you might refer to with it. In terms of touch, it might be the stickiness of that ring on a particular surface. It might be the odour, the bitter smell of coffee, which invades your nostrils as you go into a particular room. Okay? Again, these are the minor details. Be thinking about how you're going to get these, however, that's why I've included that arrow there, into a narrative. It can be quite a useful thing to have a word count, okay, because obviously it focuses your mind. One of the things, again, which I've been doing with my family is doing some drawing and stuff like that. And one thing, if you actually say, right, you've got an unlimited amount of time in order to do a portrait, and you focus on the detail and trying to get it exactly right, then actually sometimes it's not a particularly creative process, and you can get a bit bogged down in too much detail. And it's the same with writing. If you do something quickly, if you give yourself, say, right, I'm going to do this in 10 minutes, 100 words, 10 minutes, I'm going to get something done, or simply do my planning for 10 minutes, then actually you can get something down quite quickly, exactly like a few lines in a portrait. So, a coffee cup ring, a log fire. Think about how that might apply to particular senses. Is it just the visual sense of those flames coating the logs? Okay? Is it the feeling of it in terms of the heat of it? Is it the smell of it? Is it the taste of it? When you've actually got a log fire where there's lots of smoke billowing out, it actually gets into your mouth, gets into your lungs. Is it the taste of it, that acrid smell of burning wood? Or is it something to do with the sound of it, the crackle of it, okay? As the logs sort of fall around as they burn. So you can be thinking of it in a number of ways. Why 2 cigarettes in an ashtray? Okay? I've made particular detail here. What might that tell us about the nature of our narrative? What's happening in it? Is it simply something which is one person is smoking a great deal, they don't actually finish lighting or smoking one cigarette before they start another one? Are there 2 people there? Is one of them not there anymore? Does that tell us something? So again, you can actually be impacting on your narrative by very small details. Okay, it's that show, don't tell again. Okay? How are you going to include a wet dog? Is it going to be the visual of the spiraling droplets of water as the dog actually tries to shake itself free of all the water? Is it the smell of it? Okay? Is it something else? Leaves in the wind? Bubbles in the water? I've told some sort of the groups I teach a story particular to me about bubbles going up my forearm. So how are you going to include bubbles in the water? Goosebumps, hair on end. This is very much the case of show, don't tell. It's the type of thing I said last time. Don't tell me somebody is nervous, show me they are nervous. Through tiny little details, but again, describing that. Roasting meat. Some of this might lend itself to a very undramatic context. You might simply be saying, right, if we go back to the previous question, the question about memories or fond memories of a nice day, it might be that you're choosing to write, well, every Sunday. Every Sunday is a nice day because my family would go for a walk in the woods, whether it was summery, whether it was rainy, whatever it might be. We take the dog, there'd be that smell of sort of burning wood from somebody's bonfire. We'd come back and we'd have a cup of coffee while someone made the roast, there'd be a smell of the roast coming in and so on. Okay? You don't have to include everything, and the mud can be included in that as well. So it might simply be a very undramatic, but very nice narrative and description of something which is pleasant. Or it could be something a little bit darker. It could be something to do with World War I. It could be the mud of World War I, the goosebumps. It could be the smell of fire. It might be something quite unpleasant. Obviously a lot of the soldiers smoked there. It could simply be the smell of wet dog. You don't actually have the wet dog in it at all. It could be one of the soldiers is simply smelling of wet dog because his uniform is so saturated in water. And obviously things like why a single glove in a context like the trenches or anything like that, or why a single drop of blood. We're going to have a look at some suggestions about suspenseful writing, how to write in a sort of tense way, a tense atmosphere, in due course. And actually one of the things the advocate of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, famous director, say it doesn't work if you've got blood everywhere. It's the suggestion of something which is absolutely key. So why a single drop of blood? So this can be another exercise that you are doing. Use particular items. You can use these that I've given to you, or if you use them up, you want to do something different, just find items from around your house, okay? Or around where you live, or whatever it might be, and try and integrate them, but using your senses into a piece of creative writing, okay? Now, other things that you can be doing, okay? When it comes to the planning stages, I've said that it's important you think about your narrative, okay? But these are things I always sort of think, well, if you're going to use those 10 minutes, they wouldn't give you 10 minutes if they didn't want you to use it very constructively. And the key thing about C1 and C2 is they are very, very attritional exams. And by that I mean, from the moment the examiner says, the invigilator says, turn over your paper and make a start, you are going to find it tough going for the whole of that hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours. Okay? Be it because you are planning and reading the comprehensions, because you're actually writing your responses to those comprehensions, or whether actually you are moving on to your section Bs. You haven't got a great deal of time to sit back and be satisfied and rest on your laurels. Okay? So there need to be processes you put in place. Okay? And when it comes to things like your planning stage, do be thinking in terms of, well, what can I actually fill those 10 minutes with? Within those 10 minutes, I've got to think of my narrative. I've got to think of the story. Okay? And that is where I've suggested.
All right, sir.
Hello, miss. How are you?
I'm
Do you want to come in and make an appearance?
Who are we talking to?
Year 11.
Ah.
We've got a visitor. I'm just going to check it's recording again.
Good afternoon, Year 11s. How's it going? Missing you all so much, seriously. All I've done is eat cake. Got to be done. Take care. Sorry, sir. Carry on.
Quite right. Well, where was I? Right, planning stage. You've got those 10 minutes. You need to make sure actually you're using that planning stage as intensively as you possibly can. Okay? So do that arrow, okay? And we'll talk about that one again in due course. You obviously need to be thinking about all this stuff we've looked at before. So are you going to be writing in third person or the first person? And is it appropriate to the piece that you're writing? Not just the genre of the piece, but the actual purpose of the piece that you are writing. Okay? You need to be thinking about voice as well. Last time round we did a whole lesson pretty much on voice, not just the narrative voice, but the introduction of other voices and the impact they can have on the success of your characterization. Okay? You need to be thinking about the balance of your narrative, your storytelling, something which is going to drive the plot, however you want to do that, and the descriptive writing you're going to put in there, with all those techniques we've spoken about. You need to make sure that the focus of your question is relevant to the question itself. It sounds an obvious thing to say, but when you've got 4 choices, I actually had some students said, I've got a really good piece of creative writing in mind, and whatever the question I'm given, I'm simply going to adapt it to that. Well, okay, if you're lucky, there's something similar that comes up, okay? But you've got to make sure, nonetheless, that actually what you're writing about is focused on the focus of the question. Other things you need to be thinking about is making sure you're writing using your senses. Show, don't tell. I've said a number of times, this is all about this idea of not actually telling me something about somebody or something, but actually planting that seed of interpretation in the reader's mind. We're going to have a look at that again when it comes to looking about how to write in a suspenseful way. Okay? Making sure that, again, this is one of the things that examiners always look for. It's on the mark scheme. Is the writer using a variety of sentence structures and techniques? Okay? Again, you've got to make it absolutely relevant to what you're writing, and you've got to craft it accordingly. You might think it's a little bit an infantile way, a bit of a childish way of writing to be used as loads of conjunctions, and. But if you're describing something which is a repetitive, mundane process, it's absolutely appropriate. So don't just think I've got to include a one-word sentence. I've got to include something which starts with an adverb and then a comma. I've got to have something that starts with a participle, whatever it might be. But make sure that you are using your sentence structure and your syntax, your word order, appropriate to what you are writing. It's about you crafting it. Okay, you're in control of it. It's a tool for you to use. Okay. One example of that is how might you use dialogue. So when it comes to voice and things like that, dialogue, beyond a description of a particular